All right, let's do this. Season 2, episode number 27, this one time in real estate. Investors. Figuring out how to make money or something. I don't know. But see, we have this new cover page, if you've seen on our podcast. And we just put one word, like her notebook. Just said notebook. Anyway, investors.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was at a get together last week, and it was all about investing. Actually, a colleague or a friend of mine has his own podcast, and he runs an investment group in St. Louis, like a small investment group. And he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, I had no idea that Mark was kind of a pretty big investor and got his start in investing." And I was like, yeah, it's interesting. I guess a lot of people may not necessarily know that. So, but obviously Mark is a very brilliant mind in the investment world, and we host an investment meeting Mark hosts an investment meeting every Friday for our team. And I was like, we should probably make that like a bigger, well-known thing to talk through that and for you to discuss it. And specifically, I think it would be interesting to hear your advice for like a first-time investor because it's an interesting market to be a first-time investor for sure. And I think there's some misconceptions probably people have about it, and also traps that people can fall into. And so anything that you can maybe give them to equip them for properly preparing to enter the investment world would be valuable, and I'd love to hear it as well.
By any chance, were you looking at my texts over the last day?
I was not.
Oh, really? One of my oldest and best friends. I need to buy some real estate. Let's find something. And my question, what do you want to own? I'm no expert. Multifamily, home, apartment. You tell me.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So
Did you
how
give
I
him
run?
some tips?
No. It's too hard. But anyway, no. Here's what the story is. So first of all, I am incredibly bullish on real estate, especially you owning real estate, me owning real estate. Like, we are in the business of real estate, so what do we know better? So I could buy a stock. My problem with a stock is I have literally zero control. I can see the ticker. I maybe have a stock certificate, although most of my stock certificates are held by my financial planner. So there's actually nothing tangible there, except the fact it's going to go up, it's going to go down. Okay? The beauty of real estate, and it's actually one of my proudest moments, is when you actually drive by, right? You own a couple homes, investment homes, and you may not drive by like you used to, but if you don't, and I know we talked about it in an earlier episode, one's for one child, one's for another. The third one got completely shafted. So,
correct.
Is that right?
As of now, yeah. We'll get her one.
Cool.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Your children to drive by and say, by the way, you own that, or we own that, but eventually that is such an incredible thing, where I happen to be at one of my buildings right now. And the tangibleness of driving up to your building, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So here's the thing. We're in real estate. We know real estate better than anything else. We could be in, you have an experience in, for example, you have a passion for the car wash business. You don't exactly know how to run the numbers, but you probably have a general idea. If you saw a car wash, you're like, I like that car wash. I like the location. I like the way it's easy to get in, out. I like the full service aspect or the self-service, but they have plenty of that, right? I mean, you know that more than me. But this real estate thing. So we're at a building right now where I brought you to our first meeting. We had absolutely no expectation of what we were going to see. We walked around. Sometimes you either have foresight or not, meaning foresight of like, I can make this room better, I can do this, right? It's turned out pretty amazing, but you were there on the first journey. And I, at the end of that meeting, said, I'm buying it. And the interesting thing is, and it wasn't I'm buying it like a big shooter. I actually am buying it because it checks all my boxes with knowing a couple things. It checked all my boxes for use that I knew I was going to use. But the other thing, and this segues to what you talk about all the time, agents. You love when agents preview. Why do you want agents to preview?
Because it educates, well, there's a lot of reasons, but it educates them on the market. They have the opportunity to see something in person and understand it better, and then they can share it with their client and potentially get an edge on the opportunity.
But the first thing you said is the educational component.
Yep.
The educational component, which as we talk about, and this is dedicated investing, but as we get into changes in real estate and other, our goal is to provide certainty to our buyers and sellers. The way we can ensure, not ensure 100% certainty, but the way we can ensure a better opportunity of certainty is when we understand the market. We understand values. We understand what opportunities are out there. I was on a journey for about a year and a half to look for our new headquarters. I'd looked at a lot of buildings. As a matter of fact, I wrote and had 2 accepted contracts. One, an old Chinese restaurant, very small, would have been cool, but the parking was a nightmare, which I actually walked on the parking, although having known what I know today, it would have been too small of a building. We would have outgrown it. It wasn't functional, and it needed way too much work for the return I was going to get. So I walked on that. The next one was a cool building off of Manchester that you visited, and cool visibility on a high traffic road, cool glass and other, but to segment it into offices and other wouldn't have worked because HVAC systems. Then I went to a third one, which I did not write a contract on with you. So you visited me with these.
Yep.
The third one we visited, very nice, good looking office right near our other office. Problem was it needed some dollars to make it good for our company, to make it, and then potentially to rent out spaces. There were still some shortcomings of like where the courier room, they would have had to walk through a beautiful space, which I didn't want, but that would have been okay. But here's the thing, the price just didn't make the numbers work. Okay, so you and I had seen significantly more. I also studied the market, but you and I had seen significantly more, or I'd seen significantly more, but together we saw 3 or 4.
Yep.
We came here and I look at you, no, this works perfect. And here's the thing. Had I not previewed the others, had I not understood the values of the other, what they were charging, what I had them under contract for, the perceived fix, the shortcomings of not enough parking, not the right space, when I saw this, I knew I was buying it because it checked my boxes. By the way, a greatest of real estate agents should be able to do the same thing for theirs, although we're not talking about a traditional real estate, but look, we have investors listening. We also have real estate professionals. You should be able to check the boxes for your client and give them the guidance when they want to see a house. If you've previewed it, or within the first 5 minutes, you should be able to, you know what, this is your right home, or you know what, I know how important X, Y, or Z is. This doesn't check X, Y, or Z, so let's go, okay?
Yeah.
But to segue back to investing, real estate has been incredibly good to me from an investment perspective because of really twofold. Number one, I started and I learned the market. I cut my teeth in properties that I would never buy today, but it was an incredible, painful learning experience because I bought in subpar areas. I like to buy at this point, pay a premium and buy a Class A. There'd be Class A, Class B, and Class C properties. Again, how you want to classify an A, B, or C, that's somewhat irrelevant, but an A would be great areas, great property after it's renovated. A C would really be ultimately subpar areas, subpar tenant, etc. But I would recommend the best value is in the C's. The best value of where you can afford is C, but there's a reason it's a C. But I would highly recommend many people, if you're going to jump into this, cut your teeth on those C's. Cutting your teeth on an A property, number one, you're going to make mistakes, and the mistakes are more expensive in a Class A because the cost most likely is more. The tenant base has different expectations, so the opportunity for failure is far greater. But ultimately, regardless whether it's an A, B, or C, my learning experience was when in a C, and now over time I've upgraded my portfolio to A's. It's just what I focused on. But at the end of the day, if you get out of the emotion of, I want to buy that because it's great, it's going to look good with my name on it, no. You have to run this business, the investment business, on pure numbers. There's an emotional component, but if you want to be successful long term, you have to run it on non-emotional, on figures. How much am I going to pay? How much renovation does it need? How much money am I going to put down? What is the financing? What is the taxes? What's the insurance? What are the costs to operate it conservatively? And ultimately, can whatever, whether it's tenants, if it's an apartment, can they support those fees? Co-working space, in our case, in our headquarters, can it support to run the operating expenses? Same thing with the strip center. Can those retail tenants support all the expenses? So when I look at the apartment, so if I were to do apartment, commercial office, and then commercial retail, if I were to look at the apartment business, I think you have to have some sort of niche in today's market. Like, for example, if I were going to buy in certain areas, the differentiator is not to buy a high-rise where there's 10 other high-rises, and now I have to be a better high-rise or I have to be priced differently. I may want to find the townhome rentals in that area, meaning like side-by-sides where they may have a garage instead of a shared underground garage, a shared elevator. No, this is your own entrance. This is your own garage. It's more of your own home. That's why single-family home rentals right now are really strong, meaning there's the developers out there that have created this whole new niche, which is buying and developing single-family homes, just like a regular neighborhood, except they're all for rent. Well, if you have a niche, it's a great thing. Now, a niche you can have, so some of the properties I own them at the right price. When you buy right, you can rent right. If you buy it wrong, you have to over-rent, have a value, and it may not work. It may actually be vacant. So I have some opportunistic rentals in great areas where I just bought them right, so I'm actually able to cut below the market. And by the way, a nicely rented tenant that's paying their rent consistently versus every last dollar can in many cases be the best tenant. The other thing to consider, stick with me. Imagine for simplicity purposes, you have a $1,200 a month rent, which is essentially, and then every month that it's not rented, spread that $1,200 over the year, for example, and it brings it down $100. So in many cases, to just have a great solid renter, maybe a little less value, but to not have the vacancy. Mm-hmm. Also on the re-rent, I'm not a huge re-renter of raising rates. If I have a great solid renter, let's go for it. Let's rent, maybe bump it up a little bit, but let's keep them. Right. Helpful?
Yes, so much. It's interesting because I've heard your philosophy on Mark always errs on the side of conservatism when he is debating purchasing a flip, or I'm sure a hold, a fix and hold that you're going to ultimately own in your portfolio. And when I was newer, I was always like, man, that seems a little extreme. Like if it's over by $2,000, Mark's like, I'm not buying it. And I think anyone that's newer into the game of investing can come to terms with it in their mind to be like, oh, it's fine. I'll just pay a little bit more on the purchase, but then I'll just make up for it on the other stuff that I was going to do. And so I want you to talk about how that final 5% or whatever you say is like
absolutely,
because I love you saying that, because it took me a while to come to terms with your mindset, or your erring on the side of conservatism, that if it is over the budget that you've set for yourself by the smallest amount, you're not going to move forward with it, and how that, I think, ultimately has protected you probably in the long run. Maybe you've had some things that have happened that have made you that way. I don't know. But now being able to stick to your guns like that is able to protect you and make you a stronger investor.
And I appreciate that. I think conservatism will never get you burned. Mm-hmm. It's only $2,000 more of a cost. The fix is only $2,000 more. The rents are only $100 less. Well, the compounding effect of it paying $2,000 more, so financing or putting down out of pocket $2,000 more, and then the fix is more. Now that's more expenses. And then if I'm going to hold it and rent it, well, it's okay. I want to get it rented so I can take less money. And it's the compounding effect. It's also a discipline. The point is that if you do it on one and it works out, you may do a little bigger the next time. You may push it. And by the way, this is a business that you don't want to be too far off. You can afford so I've always liked a 4-family more than a single family, because if I have one vacancy, I can absorb it more than the one vacancy on a house. If I have a house and there's a vacancy, you're getting zero.
Right.
You have to put all utilities in your name. You have to manage the property from a standpoint of the lawn or the snow removal, etc. So I've always liked, if I have a piece of property, to have more than one tenant.
Yeah.
So I just think that discipline is an exceptional process, because if you're consistent on project to project, and so when you talk about it, if I were to work backwards, and then I want to get into we talked about about wanting a niche in, for example, apartment, or being under market rents that allow you to not be vacant. We're going to talk about office, commercial, and then we're going to talk about residential. But going back to, this is how I look at every fix and flip. I look at, what is the conservative retail? I'm not saying what is the retail that I can get if I push all comps, break all records, because I'm going to do a better fix and flip. No. If I hit more than that conservative retail, awesome. But what is the conservative retail? Let's use numbers. Conservative retail, $400,000. Okay, that's on every day of the week. Can it sell for $425,000? Sure. Am I willing to then budget at $425,000, which means it allows me to pay $25,000 more? Absolutely not. I'm going to start with that $400,000 conservative. What is the conservative fix on this? Meaning, we find a couple things we weren't expecting behind the walls, a little cushion. We have an overrun here or there. There's inspection fixes if we were to flip it and the buyer finds a couple things that we missed. All of those things, imagine conservative, $100,000. And imagine on that, I want to make a 10% return on the $400,000. So my 10% return on the $400,000 is $40,000, even though, by the way, 10%, that's probably a little shy. It probably should be 15% or more. Imagine then, let's take it a little further and say our goal is to make 15%. 15%, $60,000. $400,000 conservative retail. All expenses are going to be $100,000. That means flipping, or the fix fees. It means insurance. It means holding costs, conservative holding. Not that we're going to do the whole fix and flip it in 1 month. No, it's going to be 5 months, 4 months, whatever. That number is conservative because we have to apply an interest rate. Interest rate today at 7.5% to 8% on a flip looks different in the holding cost than if it were 3% just 2 years ago. So your holding costs are way more integral today. We have to be conservative. Then there's outgoing commission. You're going to have to pay the agent that represents the buyer, etc. Going through all that, we want to make 15% on the $400,000, $60,000. It's going to be $100,000 of all-in expenses. $400,000 minus $100,000, $300,000 minus the $60,000 of profit, $240,000. I may even go and write a contract at $230,000 to $235,000. However, I cannot pay more than $240,000. I just psychologically can't. Well, what about $241,000? Would $241,000 change the deal? It would not. I'd make, instead of $60,000, I'd make $59,000. $59,000 is better than zero. But here's the thing. It's a trap. It's a trap that if you continue to get caught up in, you're going to allow yourself to psychologically overpay for certain items. And what we see, so going back to Sarah's question about that last 5-10%, that's where the money's made especially on a renovation. So imagine that $100,000 fix with all the expenses in is really going towards 110 just because we had a couple overruns that we didn't even budget for. Mm-hmm. Now, what do I do with the 10,000? I can have two philosophies. Mark Gelman bites the bullet. If I'm already in the deal and there is an overrun, I bite the bullet and do that last 10,000 because I know that last 10% is the thing that's going to move the needle when the buyers come in. That's from our buy side experience.
Absolutely.
We understand that people don't want to buy an unfinished product or a product that looks unfinished. Now they're like, if they skimped on the trim, they skimped on this. What did they skimp behind the walls? Electric, plumbing, that we can't see.
Absolutely.
Is that always the case? Not sure, but that's my psyche. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I'm always going to do that last 10% because that's where the money is actually made. And so in that case, I still have enough cushion. Did I psychologically change and a lot? No. This was a totally conservative budget. And it was unexpected that we budgeted for everything. We were right on, but still, there's enough cushion. Even if we had a $20,000 overrun that was unexpected, that we even budgeted for an overrun, we still have cushion. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's critical to run those numbers. Let's go then into, so we talked about a hot sector, which is the apartment.
Yep.
Again, there's a lot of apartments. There's a few differentiations between some of these towers right now. They all seem to have good amenities. Some of it's availability and some of it is just purely the value, the price, okay? But I like to stay, if everybody's doing this, I like to, if there's a market for it, do over here because then I have a niche, okay? So in this commercial, this is an opportunity right now that I'm still extremely cautious of on office buildings. The reason is the whole work from home. We've seen these changes. However, I'm going on record right now, it's July of 2024, that there will be phenomenal opportunities over the next year of Class A, again, these great properties that are being underutilized by employers. They're going to be struggling. COVID 2019, 20-ish, 5-year notes. So in the investment world, predominantly, you're going to sign 5-year notes, and then they have to be refinanced. They're going to be amortized over 20 years, but then in 5 years and a day, you're going to have to refinance. Well, those rates were in the 2.5s, 3s. Now they're in the 7.5, 8s. Yeah. Those are going to reset. So even in the 5 years, if you paid down equity, the amount you're going to have to write to the bank on a monthly basis has gone up exponentially because the equity isn't a great enough pay down versus the new increase in interest rates. So we're going to see some great buildings where those owners just cannot pay those bills. So I'm keeping my eye on those very heavily because I do believe there'll be opportunities. But keeping in mind, the exact same philosophy that happens in the apartment business is what happens in the office. The only difference is you hope that your tenants in the office aren't sleeping in there like they are in an apartment. But the point is you're evaluating the value of every office, of every floor, and essentially calculating a conservative amount. Okay? Take it then to retail. Well, are we bullish on retail or not? First of all, I love Class A real estate. Class A retail I like because of traffic patterns, because of great areas. There's less vacancies. What we've seen over time is retail has struggled. We talked about it a couple days ago. Retail's struggling because of Amazon has done a number for retail.
Correct. Yeah.
However, an interesting thing, a lot of retailers have gone out of business. But in St. Louis, an interesting dynamic has happened, which is cannabis. Cannabis is actually filling up a significant amount of retail right now. Do I like seeing cannabis? I just don't. It's not my jam. I don't think it benefits the community. But we are seeing those stores really help to fill up, although there's still vacancies. I'm still concerned overall about the retail environment. I just think retail is very difficult. National retailers make a decision like Walgreens. We're going to close 25% of our stores across the board. The independent small retailer, it's hard. It's hard to have one store, even if you have the greatest product, but nobody knows about you. They can go out of business. So retail is a very challenging thing. Although I love retail, I don't love retail centers per se because I think retail is very challenging right now. The hottest overall sector other than the apartment is industrial. We are seeing such a strength by these Amazons renting at different distribution centers, renting space right now. And so that's actually a really interesting space. But overall, it's all the same, whether it's retail, whether it's office, whether it's a single family, a multifamily, it's all the same. You have to know your numbers. Revenue, how much is going to come in conservatively based on rents. Expenses, how much is going to go out based on all expenses. Overestimate that taxes are going to go up. Insurance is going to go up. Utilities are going to go up, right? Because costs are going up. It all falls down to the bottom line. Is that bottom line number, is that acceptable or not acceptable to me? When we fix and flip, different than owning. Because when you own, if you're not funding negative cash flow and you're at least paying off all your expenses and maybe keeping a little bit for yourself,
right.
Although you have to be careful, you have to reserve because the roof is pretty expensive. HVACs are pretty expensive. So we see people cash flow neutral, but they're not reserving anything, and then expenses, and there's a big expense. But the thing when you own a building, at least you are paying down the note, and you're hopefully building equity, and you have an asset. Again, I could never talk about this subject if you said, Mark, talk to me. Is that like a Stanley or no?
No, knockoff, but similar.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that. I like that you're knocking them off. Anyway, if you asked me about this business, I don't know. I don't know anything about it, and that's why I don't like. I could probably, in the heart of the Stanley, when we did one on it, me and you could have tried to find hundreds, put them on eBay 1-to-1, and made a little bucks.
Yeah.
But what I don't know is I just was at Dick's Sporting Goods, and literally they had hundreds, every color, but it wasn't like Stanley, I don't think.
Okay. Well, now everybody's making similar
right,
styles.
knockoffs.
Yeah.
But the point is I don't know this. I don't know this business.
Me neither. Yeah.
I don't know this business. What I do know is real estate, and that's why I stay in my lane. I buy what you know. Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch was Fidelity Magellan's money manager. Fidelity Magellan was the largest mutual fund in the world. He built it for Fidelity. He had one simple philosophy: buy what you know. And that's my thing. So, for example, there's certain retailers, restaurants, and other that when you drive by, imagine you drive by this thing called McDonald's years ago, every day, and you're like, I got to buy stock in there. Or Walmart years ago, or Microsoft years ago, Google years ago I'm using. That's buying what you know, what you use. It's not buying a biotech company that's going to solve cancer, Alzheimer's, or other that we know nothing about.
Totally, right.
So that's it. That's my story on I don't know if that is what you were looking for.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. I think anyone's going to be, they're going to be better for listening to that because I didn't realize you'd cover all the bases. So that's even more valuable. So thank you.
Now we can go deep on it any time. But hey, we're going to wrap this up or no?
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. Leave it at that.
Let's do this. This is fun stuff. By the way, I'm passionate.